New life, cheating wife story, Reddit cheating story. As the saying has it, in a fit of pique, I decided that if I was going to have to move anyway, it might as well be as far away from where I was as it could reasonably be. It couldn't be a little village in the back of beyond, though I was tempted. I needed to work, and there's not much call for my skills in a hamlet where the biggest event is the annual sheep shearing contest. Besides, I was a city person at heart, and the thought of spending long evenings engaged in lively philosophical discussions with sheep, or about them, didn't fill me with enthusiasm. I had the choice of East Coast or West. I chose the East, drawn by the promise of a fresh start and the hum of urban life. The next tasks were to find somewhere to stay and something to do. Finding a place proved relatively easy. I phoned around various letting agencies until I secured a short-term lease on a right-sized flat at a rent I didn't think was extortionate. As it happened, I'd picked the right time of year to move. In 3 or 4 months, I'd have paid over twice as much when the tourist season kicked into full swing. Finding a job was less straightforward, not because there was a dearth of them, but because the terms and conditions mattered more than the job itself. I could have applied for a full-time vacancy, but I didn't want to be tied down. After all, I might hate the place and want to move on. Freelance was the answer. Here again, I had choices. Sign with a large national agency or a small local one. Large agencies with well-known names were safer. They ran things by the book, and you knew you'd be paid at the end of the month. The downside? Clients tended to bulk buy, so you could end up in a team of half a dozen or more, slogging away to meet some deadlines scribbled in the sand by an MD after too many gin and tonics at a business dinner. Smaller agencies were more personal. The good ones often had interesting assignments and looked after their people better. The bad ones just screwed everybody around. Unless you knew the scene, it was a gamble to tell which was which. I chose a smaller agency, guided by gut instinct. They had some good clients, and the work sounded intriguing, but the clincher was the voice of the woman on the phone. She came across as honest, genuinely interested in signing me up, not just some bored receptionist reading a script. I had all the usual hassles with packing, storage, lawyers, the gas board, the phone company, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, but eventually, I was on my way north. I picked up the keys from the letting agent and, after a few wrong turns, found the flat. It wasn't quite what I'd expected from the particulars. Funny how agents' descriptions never quite matched reality, though you couldn't accuse them of outright lying. It was comfortable enough, I suppose. A small, almost square box divided into 3 rooms, kitchen, and bathroom by partitions of 2 layers of plasterboard rather than proper walls. Still, it was only for 3 months. I had a settling-in day, then reported to my first client. With a local accent now in my ear from the agency's directions, I didn't have trouble finding the place. The job turned out to be exactly as described. The people were friendly, letting me get on with my work without undue interference. I made a couple of tentative inquiries about the agency and got a big thumbs up. That was a relief. It meant I stood a good chance of getting paid. The month whizzed by. Unlike some bigger companies, this one was grateful for the assistance provided by outsiders. I was included in all the usual social activities, both inside and outside work. A couple of staff, learning I was a heathen from the South, took it upon themselves to remedy the sad lack in my education about the many benefits and proud history of their city. People like that can be a bore, but as the new boy, I was grateful for their input, especially since it was done in a light-hearted manner. Another effect of being the new boy was that I went out of my way to be helpful, even in areas that weren't really my concern. If this agency was as good as the company believed, I wanted a glowing report to go back to them. If I got my feet under the table, I'd be well set for future work. We parted with genuine regret. I think. I did a good job. No, I know I did a good job. The next day, I had a phone call from the agency confirming it. They also asked me a favor. I'd been scheduled to go to another small company in a nearby town for the next 2 weeks, but one of their star people had been in a car accident, leaving them short of a body for a major client in the city. Could I possibly help them out? Now, I can smell a con when I hear one. I don't mean they were lying. The poor bugger probably really was in hospital with his leg in plaster or worse, but it was clear they weren't giving me the whole story. The clincher was when they offered more money. I was tempted to tell them to piss off, I was new and didn't owe them any loyalty. But I said yes. I don't know why. The job turned out to be as bad as I'd suspected. For a start, the company was large and bureaucratic, with their own way of doing things that bore no resemblance to any generally accepted standards. They were adamant we work their way. It's not my favorite way of working. With non-standard procedures, you waste time getting in tune with them, to the detriment of the actual work. But I can live with it. The killer was the project manager. She was, to put it politely, a pompous idiot. There were 3 of us from the agency on a 6-week project, and we spent most of the first morning in her office while she told us, essentially, that we were the lowest of the low, good-for-nothing time wasters, and she'd be keeping a close eye on everything we did. I glanced at my fellow inmates. They'd been here before and knew the score, their faces carefully neutral. We started work, and sure enough, I wasted time trying to understand why I had to complete Form AB-123 for X and Form UV-789 for Y when X and Y were 2 parts of the same thing. Mrs. Buffoon, as I christened her, was not happy and made certain I knew it. She had her deadlines and expectations, and I was damned well going to meet them. I did, through the simple expedient of working late more days than not. It was clear she was trying to rattle me, to prove her theory that all contractors were useless scumsuckers, and I was damned if I'd give her the satisfaction. My teammates were no help either. They took this job for the pay and were only grateful that, because I was in the spotlight, they could get on with their work in relative peace. I say relative because Mrs. Buffoon was a great believer in teams, despite having no clue how to run one. We had to complete weekly forecasts, daily diaries, and weekly progress reports, all examined in great detail and publicly criticized at the weekly team meeting. After ripping our current progress to shreds, she'd then tell us in great detail what we should accomplish next week, which bore no relationship to the work that actually needed doing. It never seemed to impinge on her consciousness. I quickly discovered my teammates had developed a technique of slanting their reports to make it appear that what they did was what she thought they ought to be doing. The 6 weeks passed eventually. As we left the building for the last time, my teammates invited me for a drink. I didn't quite tell them where to shove it, though I was tempted. Why should I socialize with them when they'd let me be their fall guy for a month and a half? I phoned the agency the next day to say I wouldn't be available for several days. I was taking some time off. "Take a week, you deserve it," the woman on the phone said. "I'll pay you half fee as a thank you." That wasn't unusual, it was unheard of. "You don't need to do that," I said. "You helped me out of a sticky situation. I appreciate it," she replied. "Well, there's an old adage about gift horses. Then you'd better avert your eyes quickly. Take it, I insist." "Thanks, that's very generous," I said. "I've got something lined up for you a week Monday. Call me later in the week, we'll go over it." That was an interesting conversation. I'd always talked to the same woman on the phone, assuming she was just a liaison for contractors. But she'd said she would pay the bonus and insisted I take it. Employees, unless they're very senior, don't make that sort of offer. So who was I dealing with? An intriguing little mystery. I spent the week looking for better accommodation. Maybe it was my lucky week, because I found the ideal place. A 4-room flat in an old Victorian tenement. I didn't quite follow the story about how it came to be vacant, but I wasn't bothered. Even better, in exchange for moving in at the end of the month and committing to a 12-month lease, I got a few pounds off the rent. It was a bit more expensive than my current place, but every little helped. I phoned the agency on Friday to update them on my pending change of address and get details of the next assignment. My intriguing contact complimented me. "You've struck it luckier than you thought. Your new flat's in a reasonably desirable area. Planning on sticking around, then?" I asked. "So it would seem," she said. "Good." She didn't elaborate. She seemed in an unusually chatty mood, and I had no objections. Her telephone manner was pleasant, and she was easy to talk to. I hung up even more intrigued. Why was she pleased I'd be here for the foreseeable future? The new job was much more to my liking, as were the ones after that. By now, summer was waning, and the hordes of tourists were packing their bags to return wherever they'd come from. Then I got another call from my mystery lady. "I'm going to impose on your good nature again," she said without preamble. "Oh no," I groaned. "Not Mrs. Buffoon again?" "Mrs. Buffoon," The project non-manager on that last crappy job you dropped me in? She laughed. The first time I'd heard her laugh. A very pleasant sound. No, not Mrs. Buffoon. I need a team leader urgently. I know you've done that sort of thing before. Would you help me out again? What sort of team, what sort of company? I asked cautiously. In fact, I'd already made up my mind. I'd take it. The company was a large financial institution, and the assignment was to fill in for a permanent staff member who'd gone on long-term sick leave. It's not a good position to fill. First, you've got to get up to speed with ongoing projects in no time flat. Second, you've got to placate the ruffled feathers of team members who think they should have been given the temporary promotion instead of bringing in an outsider. It never occurs to them that if they could do the job, they'd already be up for it. Third, well, let's just say I'd need all my people skills and then some. The contract was open-ended but guaranteed at least 2 months. Turned out not as bad as I'd feared. I had a good team, most of whom realized the necessity of my presence. There was the usual jockeying for position among my peers and attempts to dump the shitty projects on the greenhorn, but I'd been around enough to avoid most pitfalls. My acceptance came about 3 weeks in. I returned from a management meeting and called my team together. We've been asked to take on a new project, I said, explaining what it was. Around the table, faces blanched, and the temperature dropped. I told them to screw off, I announced casually. Expressions changed to incredulity. You didn't, did you? Not those exact words, but pretty close. Listen, guys, I may be new, but I'm not inexperienced. I can spot a can of worms at 100 paces, and that project has it written on the tin in big bold letters. I was invited for a drink that Friday, and I knew I was one of them for the duration. Another thing happened. I rediscovered my appetite for women. The circumstances that led to my flight north had soured me on the species. My wife, Helen, had cheated with a coworker, and I'd caught them in our bed. Her laughter still echoed in my skull when I walked in. I'd been too busy finding my feet to bother with romance since, but one morning, I bumped into an attractive blonde at the coffee machine. It was being its usual temperamental self, communing with the mother ship, as they called it when it randomly stopped, then started again. We got chatting, and I realized with surprise that the old spark was there. It seemed mutual. We kept bumping into each other, seemingly by accident. I asked her out. She accepted. We had a good time, which led to a second date, then a third. Pretty soon, it was accepted that Debbie and I were together. Neither of us expected much. She'd been bruised, though not as badly as me, and we weren't looking for long-term commitment. We dated for just over a month, then moved on by mutual consent. That relationship signaled I was available, though. From then on, I wasn't short of female companionship. Some contenders fell away when I passed word through Maggie, the IT director's PA, that I wasn't looking to tie knots, but there were enough to keep me amused. The third thing had more far-reaching consequences. I was asked to come to the operations director's office. Being invited to a director's office was generally a bad thing, except I didn't work for him or even the company, so there was no obvious reason for the summons. He began with the usual softening up questions. How was I doing? Did I like working here? How was the team? Was everything okay? I gave non-committal answers. What did he expect? That I'd say I hated it and was about to jump off a building? Then he dropped his bombshell. Would you like to come work for me as a special projects manager? For once, I was lost for words. I spluttered about the agency, my commitment, and not knowing if I'd settle here permanently. He waved it aside and asked me to give it serious consideration. If I was interested, we'd talk job definition, pay, and perks. His only commitment was that I'd earn as much as I did contracting, with a pension scheme and benefits to boot. I walked out in a daze, not hearing a word anyone said for the rest of the day. I felt no better in the morning. The offer was tempting, no doubt, but the biggest buts were, did I want full-time employment again? What exactly were special projects? What if there weren't any because his budget got cut? And what responsibilities and authority would I have? I needed a friendly voice at the agency, though I suspected it'd turn less friendly once I spoke. Congratulations and fuck, was the surprising response. Huh. Congratulations, you deserve it. I'm only surprised it's taken this long for someone to recognize your worth. Fuck, because that's my instant reaction to losing you. Can you come see me after work? Could. The address she gave was near the old docks, once a bustling port, now deteriorated with the decline in sea transport. Urban regeneration had turned it into upmarket housing and trendy wine bars replacing spit and sawdust pubs, Thai restaurants overtaking fish and chip shops. I felt sorry for the original inhabitants, wondering what became of them after the yuppie invasion. I entered a nondescript door in the grimy facade of a Victorian building just off a main street and climbed the stairs. They were in good repair, the stairwell well lit. The first landing had 2 doors, one anonymous, one with frosted glass bearing the agency's name. I opened the latter and stepped into Fantasyland. Instead of an office reception, it felt like someone's living room. The decor was green, gold, and deep pink, with a patterned carpet, thick pile underfoot. Curtains hung at the windows with decorative nets. Tan leather armchairs and 2 large pot plants flanked a coffee table. To prove it was an office, there was a wooden desk and filing cabinets. Behind the desk, regarding me with an amused smile, was a woman who could have stepped from a magazine shoot. Not a brainless blonde, but a brunette with intelligence in her brown eyes. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "Yes," I said, sweeping my gaze around. "For a start, you can pay me more money." Her smile slipped. "I mean, if you can afford this on my fees." I winked to show I was joking, and the smile returned. "That's why we don't normally let you in here. Mutiny in the ranks and all that." "Exactly. Well, I'm here by invitation. I have an appointment with—" I paused, embarrassed. I'd spoken to the lady on the phone for 6 months and didn't know her name. The receptionist grinned. "I could wind you up and insist you prove you have an appointment, but I won't. I know who you are, and Miss Boswell is expecting you." "Ha! And I could foil your dastardly plot by making a single phone call," I retorted. "Will you tell Miss Boswell I'm here?" "Curses, foiled again," she said with a laugh. "I already have. She shouldn't be long. Take a seat." I felt lightheaded. This place seemed unreal. I'd worked for agencies before, and they were always sharing affairs, even the big ones. How could a small agency afford such luxury? The receptionist, a model girl in a model office, combined with yesterday's job offer made me feel I'd stepped into a dream. The room faded for a second. "Are you all right?" she asked, concerned. "Yes," I said, blinking. "I'm fine, thank you." "You better sit down. Can I get you anything?" "A glass of water." "No, thanks. I'll be fine." I took a deep breath. I don't know what came over me. "You sure? You looked overwhelmed." I grinned. "Well, you're a pretty overwhelming person." "I assume that's a compliment?" She smiled. "Most definitely. In which case, thank you. It won't get you more money, though. I suspect it won't even get me a date." She made a little moue. "Unfortunately, you're right." I gave an exaggerated, world-weary sigh. "I thought as much." She giggled. At that moment, a woman entered from behind the reception area, advancing with a smile and outstretched hand. "Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm Natasha Boswell." Despite regular phone chats, I hadn't formed a mental image of her. If pushed, I'd have guessed 40-something and motherly. Her voice gave that impression. The vision before me couldn't have been more different. "Pleased to meet you at last," I said faintly, shaking her hand, taking in the well-filled, exquisitely tailored blouse and skirt, perfectly made-up face, expertly coiffed dark blonde hair, and glamour model figure. It wasn't just her looks. She had the air of a woman in her prime, totally confident in herself and her abilities. I straightened my shoulders and sucked in my tummy subconsciously. "Come through, we'll talk." She led me down a short corridor, opened a door, and gestured me inside. She looked equally impressive from behind, high heels emphasizing her shapely legs, adding a sway to her hips. "Take a seat. Can I get you anything? Tea? Coffee? Something stronger?" "I'm not sure alcohol's a good idea right now," I said with a deprecating smile. "Coffee, perhaps? You mean I might ply you with liquor and have my evil way with you?" Her smile teased. "Not at all," I said in the same spirit. "Liquor plying is my job." Ah, but we live in an age of female equality. So we do. In which case, you can ply away to your heart's content. But later. She touched my arm. A fleeting touch, but distractingly intimate. I'll be back in a minute. This room was even more luxurious. Cream and green carpet, brocade chairs, and a satin sofa that didn't scream IKEA. The widescreen TV looked top-range, the bookcase and side tables real wood. Pictures of young women adorned the walls. Photographs or paintings. I couldn't tell, but their decorous poses had an oddly erotic edge. I sank into an armchair, trying to gather my wits. Natasha returned with a tray, pouring coffee with infinite grace. She pulled a side table to my chair, setting the cup down, then took the seat opposite, stretching her long legs out and crossing her ankles. I tried not to look. She was doing it to distract me. "Are you in a hurry?" she asked. "Not particularly," I said, surprised. "Good. I confess I've wanted to meet you for some time." "Oh," she grinned. "I don't normally deal with contractors face to face, but you're an exception. I can understand why you don't want them here. That is, the others might spin judgment on." I gestured at the room. She raised an eyebrow. "A bigger cut?" "Exactly. I wasn't being entirely serious, you know." "I know, but others would be." I nodded, sipped my coffee, and waited. We sized each other up over our cups, each waiting for the other to speak. I was content to wait. She was making provocative comments, not me. She put her cup down and smiled. "I expect you're wondering why I regard you as an exception." She recrossed her legs, revealing a bit of thigh. I glanced, then returned to her face. I wouldn't let myself be distracted. I shrugged. "I'm curious, but I can contain it." "That's why you've lost me." "I'm afraid." "I hope not. Let's take it from the top. You came in, it wasn't what you expected, and you were overwhelmed. Yet you flirted politely with Rowena. I'm clearly not what you expect. Yet you don't ogle." She held up a hand. "I'm under no illusions about the effect I have on men. I've given you every opportunity to stare at my legs. Nice, aren't they?" She crossed them again, slowly, deliberately. I looked. They were nice legs, the sort you imagine curled around your back or head. I felt warm. After an appropriate pause, I raised my eyes. She wore an enigmatic smile. "Very nice," I agreed. "And your point is?" "My point is focus. You don't let yourself be distracted. I've had seriously good reports from every company you've worked for, yes, even Mrs. Buffoon." That surprised me. It must have shown because her smile broadened. "It's a bit warm in here, don't you think? Do you mind if I open the window?" "Go ahead. I'll take my jacket off if that's okay." "Feel free. This isn't a formal interview." She stretched to reach the window catch, her pose pushing against her blouse. She had a superb figure, mid-30s, maybe. "Would you like me to get that?" I volunteered. "No, it's just a bit stiff, that's all." "There. Got it." The catch wasn't the only thing stiff. I made a quick adjustment before settling back. She perched on the sill, evening light turning her hair into a dark blonde halo. I smiled to myself. She was pressing all the right buttons, clearly intentional. Until I figured out why, I resolved to stay unruffled. "Not Mrs. Buffoon herself, of course," she resumed. "But others noticed. That's nice. Why am I here?" "I'm sorry, here working for me. You're capable of much more." "Personal reasons." She looked at me inquiringly. "Until I know you much better, and not as my employer, that's all you're getting." "What if I said I was taking you off my books?" I gave a feral smile. "I've already had another offer, remember?" She laughed. "Touché. Okay, I won't pry. I have a problem, though. You're overqualified for the work you do. You know as well as I that very little contracting work is at a senior level. The project leader job was an exception. If you want that sort of work, you'd have to go to a big one." She sat again, elbows on knees, hands loosely clasped. "I'm going to be very honest with you, hoping you'll reciprocate." Her voice was earnest. "You've been very good for me. Thanks to your efforts, my reputation has gone up. You've set a standard my other contractors are forced to live up to. I've had applications from well-qualified people. I want to keep you, but I don't know how. You could walk out right now and I couldn't do a damn thing. I don't want that. I need to know what I need to do to persuade you to stay, what drives you. I'm proposing we forget our relationship and work for a while and just chat. She laughed. You might even get dinner out of it. It was my turn to stand. This was a turn-up for the books. I walked to the window, looking down at the tail end of rush hour traffic. Money was nice, not as an end but for what it could do. Once expenses were covered, I didn't have much I wanted to do with it. Job satisfaction was key. I liked challenges and doing a good job. Client satisfaction was secondary to my own sense of achievement. I liked variety, which is why I preferred contracting. I sighed. I'd have to tell her. I turned to face her. Sorry. I needed to get my thoughts in order. You mentioned honesty. I didn't expect you to be so forthright. Because I'll have to say things I didn't want to talk about. It's not easy even now, so I ask your patience. She didn't respond, but I saw understanding in her face. I told her about catching Helen, my ex-wife, flagrante delicto with her coworker, how I'd stupidly walked out instead of throwing her out, how her shark lawyer had taken me to the cleaners while mine was a waste of space. I told her how I'd stuck a pin in the map and ended up here. So there you have it, I said with a shrug, crossing back to my seat. I've no idea what I want, where I'm going, or what the future holds. I grinned wryly. Any ideas? She reached out and touched my hand as I passed. Another fleeting, intimate contact. Thank you, she said simply. I appreciate your candor. I gave a lopsided grin. You're a formidable woman, Miss Boswell. In an hour, you've got me to talk about something I swore I'd never mention. You're pretty formidable yourself. And it's Natasha. You'd be entitled to feel bitter and indulge in self-pity. I detected neither. I shrugged. There didn't seem a need to say anything. She leaned back, giving me another chance to admire her legs. I took it. I'm going to change the topic completely. You asked if I had ideas, irony aside. Some may come as we talk. I don't know about you, but I fancy a drink. Since moving here, I'd been persuaded of whiskey's merits, which I drank with water. A panel on the wall revealed a drinks cabinet. I watched openly as she gracefully fixed the drinks. She was bewitching, one I could become enamored with easily, though I knew she was beyond my reach. I was so caught up that I didn't look away before she turned. She smiled. I blushed. You can look if you want. Unlike many these days, I don't feel offended when a man admires me. I don't dress like this for no reason. That gave us our first topic. She regarded women insulted by admiration as stupid and repressed. It was a hard world. Everyone had to use their tools to get what they wanted. Looks were as much a tool as muscles or brains. If you weren't prepared to use them and stand up for yourself, you'd be trampled. We agreed you didn't need to be unpleasant to succeed. Often, politeness worked better than rudeness. But it could be misconstrued as weakness, and you had to be ready to take a stand. We wandered far and wide for over an hour. I felt I'd known her forever. I enjoy talking to women for their different slant on life, but never had I had a conversation like this. Eventually, we wound down. I can't remember when I enjoyed a conversation more, she said. I agree. You're a fascinating woman, Natasha. Thank you, I try. But we need to talk about why you're here. Tell me about this job offer. Not much to tell. I'd work for the operations director as a special projects manager. I'll get details if I say I'm interested. Okay. Pros and cons? I rehearsed my thoughts. You've thought it through. I'd be more surprised if you hadn't. Let's try a suppose. Suppose you get assurances. Would you take it? I honestly don't know. I'd be tempted. So would I in your shoes. Suppose you were so tempted as to say yes. What would I have to do to persuade you to say no? I looked at her in astonishment. There's a cricketing adage. Take the bad light if it's offered, especially if you're losing. You've lost me. If you're in a tricky spot, postpone defeat. Tomorrow it might rain, their star bowler might break his arm, or your side might bat like demons. If you tell me nothing, I'll accept the light. You haven't committed, and tomorrow's another day. I might still win. It had darkened as we talked. In this part of the country, at this time of year, evenings drew out slowly. We hadn't turned on the lights. In the last glimmers, Natasha seemed to glow. I couldn't tear my gaze away. I knew then what would guarantee my loyalty forever, but knew it was beyond my grasp. I barked a short laugh. Well, the answer isn't nothing. It's I don't know. Don't you? I think you do. Her voice was low, intense. I'm going to tell you a story. I must ask you not to repeat anything, but I know that's unnecessary. You're a man of honor. She paused. You wondered how, as a small agency owner, I could afford this office. The short answer is the agency is only part of it. It makes a profit, but not enough for this. The real money comes from prostitution. What? Patience, hear me out. I'm a prostitute, call girl, hooker, whatever. The door's over there. I sat rooted. Her words were pejorative, but I couldn't associate them with her. It wasn't disbelief, there was more to it. No reaction, no moral indignation, condemnation, disgust. There was cynicism in her voice. None, I said slowly. I've dealt with you professionally for 6 months and got to know you better tonight. I like and respect you. I'm shocked, but that's what you intended. Shock tactics won't work. I heard her release a pent-up breath. I knew they wouldn't, but you were worried anyway, I said with a chuckle. Yes. My name's not Boswell. I changed it. At 17, I was lured from Ukraine with a promise of a good job in Britain. Turned out to be prostitution. I was lucky. Weeks after arriving, the gang smuggling me was busted, and the house I was in was raided. They didn't find me. I'd been uncooperative, so they tied me up and locked me in a shed nearby. When no one came, I got free but couldn't get out. A man walking his dog found me. Fortunately, he didn't call the police and liked young girls. I stayed with him for 3 years. He taught me everything, got me a passport, taught me English, gave me an education. I owe him everything. He was elderly with heart problems. He had a heart attack, not fatal, but he knew his end was near. He set up bank accounts for me, gave me valuables to sell, devised an escape plan. He had another heart attack, fatal this time. In the furor, I slipped away as we'd agreed. I moved to another city, knowing I'd be a prostitute, but on my terms. I joined an escort agency. I wasn't good, but I learned what I needed. I moved again, using his money to learn grooming, deportment, dress sense, makeup. I devoured arts magazines, haunted libraries, went to theater, cinema, concerts, cheaply if you try. When ready, I joined a better escort agency. I was successful, but it wasn't enough. I was dependent and wanted independence. I used dates to learn what makes people tick, making plans. I moved here because of a client, a nice gentleman. I contacted him discreetly, letting him know I was in town and open for business. He put work my way, and I got established. I had a problem. Everything was under the counter. No taxes, no national insurance. I had money but no formal job. Authorities would notice. I needed a legitimate front. Then I had a brainwave. Call girls work irregularly if they're fussy. I knew a few, sounded them out, they agreed. This agency was born. Initially, I used prostitutes. They'd temp for days or weeks, enough for a legit job. I registered them with tax people and we could breathe easier. If careful, we could live openly without questions. She paused, sipped her drink, and laughed. What I hadn't counted on was legitimate people hearing of me and wanting to sign up, or bosses asking for more after I sent a high-class hooker as a receptionist. Suddenly, I had a bona fide business I was ill-prepared for. It nearly unraveled a couple times. I had clients and genuine temps on one side, others wanting special services on the other. Keeping them separate was tough, but I managed. Bit by bit, it grew to what it is. I was stunned, shocked, amazed, moved. She'd shown remarkable fortitude, turning adversity into strength. Grubble, I said, clearing my dry throat. Thank you for your trust, your candor. The best word for my feelings is admiration. For someone who's gone through what you have and turned out like this. How do you know what I'm like? I'm a professional hooker, 18 years. To be good, you read clients and give them what they want. I'm very good. The implication was clear. I shook my head. No, I said harshly. I've been a contractor over a decade. To be good, you give clients what they need while persuading them it's what they want. I'm very good. I'm 100% bullshit proof. She gave a shaky laugh. So long as you don't let on there's a real Natasha Boswell under the facade. I have a reputation to maintain. It wasn't much, but it eased the tension. Hooker or not, I wanted her more than anyone. Equally, I knew my chances were fading fast. Suddenly, I didn't care. The room was dark. I could barely see her. I could take the job offer or find another agency. But I had to tell her. You asked what would make me stay. I have a simple answer, one word, you. Not Natasha Boswell the call girl, but the Natasha sitting here now. I'm sorry. I'll find my jacket and go. I'll find another agency. Sit right where you are. Don't you want my response? I barked a laugh. Not really. Then you don't want to know the answer is yes? The empty whiskey glass slipped from my fingers, thumping on the carpet. My ears roared, sweat broke out. I felt fused to the chair. I couldn't rise if a bomb went off. Yes, I managed. Yes, she said firmly. But there's a condition, you have to work with me. The business is expanding. I'm coping, but barely. I'm hanging on by my teeth. I've been looking for someone a long time. I watched you with Mrs. Buffoon, I hoped. With the project leader job, I knew you were right. The problem was persuading you. Tonight, I knew the answer. Oh, that sounds cold and calculating. It isn't. If you were someone else, I'd have tried money, perks, shares. But after talking, I knew you wanted me. And I wanted you. My God. I don't know what to say. You've turned my world upside down. Say yes. If I hadn't been me, would you have offered yourself anyway, you scumsucker? She laughed without heat. Serves me right. If I go after someone with your abilities, I assume you'll use them. Yes, but it'd have been strictly business. You get what you wanted. This Natasha Boswell? Yes. Ha! You told me to say yes, I'm saying it. Yes, work with you. Yes, I'll take the real Natasha Boswell on any terms. Yes. Oh, she said in a small voice. I'm overwhelmed. Why? The way you said it, so intense. Thank you. I heard her draw a breath, her smile in the dark. If you do well, there'll be a bonus. I can't sustain the agency as it is. If I fail, a can of worms opens and people get hurt. If you stabilize it, many will be grateful. Rowena, Louise, Debbie, Tia, Shauna. I laughed, tension draining. Whoa, hold on. So far, I've only agreed to you, and I'll have a hard enough time coping with you, never mind a harem. She laughed. A genuine, relaxed, from-the-heart laugh. Fair enough. In that case, would you like to kiss the senior partner to seal the contract? Certainly. I groped for her hand in the dark, pulled her to her feet. And then the senior partner can take the junior partner to dinner? She did eventually. Dear listeners, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.